The AI alignment problem is when artificial intelligence goes to complete a goal but causes unintended consequences along the way. Imagine how humans might destroy an ant colony when we're building a house, but the AI is the human and we're the ant. The problem behind the problem is that there's no straightforward answer to this. You can try to formalize ethics, but it's really hard, and humans are very inconsistent. And even if AI does understand human intentions, it only takes one rogue IA to disregard that in pursuit of profits, or market share, military reasons, whatever. And that single misaligned artificial intelligence with the cognitive capability far above human comprehension, in theory, could lead to all sorts of bad things, the top one being like extinction of the human race, or all of us as slaves, or whatever crazy, terrible thing you want to imagine.
And the AI is just gonna think no hard feelings, man, but sometimes you just gotta pave over the ant colony.
Stanford Alpaca is a large language model similar to ChatGPT, but it's trained on and uses much less computation and storage space. The really mind-blowing part about the way it was trained is that it wasn't fed in a giant corpus of data, including all of Wikipedia and the entire internet and all of that stuff. But instead, they harnessed the API, the application programming interface from OpenAI and ChatGPT 3 or 4, whichever was out at the time, and then they had that generate the optimal training data. Whoa, that is really thinking outside the box. That is kind of a game changer because it changes the whole way that we build these models. And it opens the door for a lot of people to build really fine-tuned individual models really fast and run them locally where nobody has any oversight over that, which I'm just gonna say is probably dangerous. I mean, I don't want to be that guy who wants to stifle innovation, and this stuff's probably just bound to happen anyways, but that's a lot of power. While artificial intelligence certainly has amazing potential benefits, many are concerned about the things that can go wrong. And now, the nonprofit Mozilla Foundation that's behind the really famous web browser Firefox has been working on creating Trustworthy AI, which is a fund that's going to support startups that are focused on responsible AI development. And even though a lot of responsible people are contributing to open source AI projects, when it comes to the big tech companies, Apple, Meta, Facebook, they are the ones that have the most influence over this market. And that's the thinking behind the $30 million that was invested into Mozilla AI. The goal is to create a community of responsible people and an open source AI ecosystem around them. The initial round of funding was focused on tools for safer and more transparent generative AI, and making sure that there's good people with people-centered recommendation systems around it. Microsoft research says that GPT-4 is showing an early spark of general intelligence. And that means human-level capabilities. We can all confirm that GPT-4 doesn't come close to doing everything that a human can. But the question is all about when some tool like this, at some degree of complexity or connection to the internet, might develop its own inner motivation and goals. These researchers were using a 1994 definition of intelligence. So for now, the research was focused on reasoning, problem-solving, and learning abilities. And at this point, the model still has a lot of issues with confidence calibration, long-term memory, personalization, planning, and consistency, and it makes noticeable mistakes and spreads misinformation. Which makes me want to say it might be a long time till those are fixed, but with AI, you just don't know. Those things could all be fixed next week. AI-generated content is becoming more common in all of our lives. So a professor at Stanford decided to explore how well humans can tell the difference between AI-generated content and human-generated content. Two groups of text were put up on different websites, including OkCupid, Airbnb, and LinkedIn. And the results were surprising, according to the authors, but I'm actually not surprised. Participants can only tell the difference 50 to sometimes 52% of the time. That's literally nothing. That's a coin flip. They can't tell at all. And then the researchers go on to speculate the AI can probably learn how to write more human than human in the near future. And he also went on to learn about all these different strategies that people said they were using to find language detection, and they were assumptions that were incorrect. For example, people often wrongly associated high grammatical correctness with humans. But then they did the same with informal language, thinking that was probably human. And the study showed that people were equally incorrect at all types of text. Whether that be text from something like an online dating website, a professional website, or hospitality context. A new Vox posting outlines the case for slowing down AI. And that's because AI advancements like DALL-E 2, Stable Diffusion, ChatGPT, and GPT-4 may soon come to dominate the world long before the average person understands the risk versus reward. Now, the article found some experts in the field who advocate for a slower development of AI. Some even suggest a broad halt of the technology for 5 to 10 years to allow the civilization, our humanity, to understand what it's grappling with. And that time would allow society as a whole to to adapt to the coming changes and let experts do safety research, before then approving gradual introductions of the technology into our world. However, due to that human drive that runs a lot of companies and they want that first mover advantage, slowing down progress seems nearly impossible. Common objections include the inevitability of technology, fear of losing the AI arms race, and the belief that powerful AI is actually necessary to ensure safety. When you really look at some of these objections, they don't always hold up to scrutiny. There was an early machine learning model called word2vec. I imagine a box with a whole bunch of flies in it and then they're paused. They all stop exactly in some random location. And then from the center of the box, you draw an arrow to one of them. Now in this analogy, those flies become points, and those points represent words in the English language. And amazingly, you can take those arrows, which we're gonna call vectors, you can do mathematics on it, like trigonometry with angles, where you can actually say this arrow minus that arrow equals. You can find a dot that's called king. You can subtract it from the arrow that goes to woman, and the result will bring you to a new arrow that points to a new dot, a little fly that's paused, which actually correlates to the name queen. Now imagine that you make this box more than 3 dimensions, which is like, that's where it breaks. It's 4 dimensions, 5 dimensions, 6 dimensions, a million dimensions. Totally impossible for our brain to have any sense of visualization of that kind of a space. But computers can, and they can have billions or trillions or as many of those little dots as we need in those spaces. And amazingly, the mathematics still work and the computer can still understand what's going on. Word2vec can capture meaning in the English language by understanding the relationship between the words. And even though something like ChatGPT is well beyond that kind of thinking, there's a certain beauty in that model that's always stuck with me, and I wanted to share it because when you think about it like that, you get a sense for why it's called a black box, why we can't describe what's actually happening, and why it outputs things that are useful without any true understanding of what is happening. Explainable AI, also sometimes abbreviated to XAI, is a growing branch of the artificial intelligence field. And it's a branch that I hope really grows and catches up with the rest of the field, because the techniques that are used in XAI are not enough to explain the complexity of what we're seeing. These incredible models that are powering ChatGPT and Midjourney and Stable Diffusion, they work, and that's enough for a lot of people. So that's why the Explainable AI XIA movement is coming from a different place entirely. This is the branch of researchers that want to start thinking about artificial intelligence assuming that it comes with a bias, and assuming that that bias will lead to an unanticipated issue. The technique that's working the best for the XAI movement right now is actually to build models with a specific bias built in. And then you introduce another AI, this is called reinforcement learning, that constantly talks back and forth and corrects it. By doing this, we start way off center, but we know how off center we are. And as it corrects, we learn about what kind of things make it balanced. And once we have a sense for what was wrong and what balance looks like, we can go and look at models that are already out there in the wild and see how close to those ideals they are and give us a sense of how biased they are or how accurate they are. But the biggest battle that the XAI movement has is that the models that do the best explanations are also more costly, meaning they're much less efficient from a computational point of view, and who wants to actually spend all that extra money? But even more importantly, the people who train these models now have more responsibility on their shoulder. In some sense, it's a blessing for big tech to be able to turn a blind eye to some of the biases.